Hello everyone, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, an introduction to payrolling benefits in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter for the webinar, and I am joined by a team of experts in the background in the form of Alice, Gary and Steve, who are all standing by, ready and waiting to answer your questions. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in the webinar. So we're going to start with an introduction explaining what payrolling benefits is and how that differs from the P11D process, how it works and what's involved in registering to payroll your benefits. We're then going to move on to some practical demonstrations. So I'm going to show you how to set up benefit in kind pay elements in Sage 50 Payroll, which can be used to process payroll benefits, and also company car records, where you can record details of company cars, which will be included in your submissions to HMRC and can also be used for the calculation of the cash equivalents. We're then going to put that all together by showing you the payroll process, where it involves benefits in kind, some things to look out for in enter payments and on reports, and how that is ultimately submitted to HMRC as part of your FPS. And we'll finish with a little bit of information on the latest information we have on the future of payrolling benefits and changes that are due to come in from April 2026. Now, before we get into the content, I do have a polling question for our audience today, just to understand a little bit more about your current situation. So I'm going to put this poll onto screen now. And if you would like to join in, you would just need to vote for the options that most closely matches your situation and then click on to submit. So the question we're asking today is, how do you currently report benefits in kinds to HMRC? Now, I have given you 5 options to choose from, and you can choose multiple options if multiple answers apply to you. So are you using Sage 50 P11D currently? Do you submit P11Ds, but you do it via HMRC's portal? Are you currently payrolling your benefits? Do you plan to payroll your benefits on a voluntary basis from April 2025? Or is the other option more applicable to you? Maybe you don't currently provide benefits or you report them in some other way. So good to get a little bit of insight as to how you're doing it now. And we will talk about the government's plans for the future beyond 2026 towards the end of the session. So good to see we've had quite a few answers in there. I'm just going to close that down. And for anyone that is interested, I will share the overall results of that poll. So currently, the majority of our audience here are submitting P11Ds online via HMRC's portal. We've got 31% of you who are planning to payroll benefits from April 2025. We've then got 22% of you saying other, or you don't currently provide benefits, 19% of you using Sage's P11D software, and 6% of you who are already payrolling your benefits. So really interesting to see that. And we will have another polling question for you towards the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's get on with our introduction. And first of all, let's just explain what benefits in kind are, or BIKs for short. So these are non-cash items, so perks provided by employers to their employees that have a monetary value. And they are often or usually considered to be part of an employee's taxable income. So it means that tax is due on the value of that benefit. And it could include items such as company cars, private medical insurance, or perhaps gym memberships paid for by the employer. Now, when you provide such benefits, you do have obligations to report this information to HMRC, and the employee will need to pay the tax that is due on those benefits in kind. Now, there are currently 2 ways they can do that, and up until recently, the only way to report them would be at the end of the tax year via the P11D process, which I can see the majority of you are doing right now. And this is where the details of the benefits provided throughout the tax year are reported annually at the end of a tax year on a P11D, The employees get a copy of that P11D so they can see what taxable benefits they've had for the year. And the way that the tax is paid is that the employee gets an adjustment to their tax code. So the amount of free pay allowances is reduced on their tax code. And the effect of that is that they're paying the tax effectively in arrears on the benefit that they've received in that previous year. Now, the difference between that and payrolling is that with payrolling, the tax due on the benefit is actually being paid and collected in real time. So the value of the benefit actually goes through payroll software as a taxable amount. That item appears on the payslip rather than an end of year form for the employee. And then the tax is deducted from the employee's pay, and that is then paid over as part of your monthly payment to HMRC so that it's being received in real time. So obviously we're going to focus on payrolling benefits today. So let's explain that in a little bit more detail. So payrolling a benefit is when you deduct and pay the tax on your employee's benefit in kind through your payroll software. The way that this happens is that the cash equivalent value of the benefits are added to your employee's taxable pay in your payroll software, and then the tax due on that benefit is deducted each period. Now, this is done using a notional payment because obviously it's not money that you're giving to them, it's the value of a benefit that you've provided. So the effect in your payroll is that the tax is deducted, but the gross pay and the net pay doesn't increase by the value of the benefit. Now, what it does mean is that the form P11D is not required for any of those benefits that you have payrolled. But be aware, the P11DB, which reports the Class 1A national insurance contributions, is still required. And currently that is still done at the end of the tax year on the P11D employer declaration. So the individual P11D forms aren't needed for the employees, but you still need to report your Class 1A as you have done in the past. Now, payrolling benefits is currently voluntary, and you do need to register with the payrolling service in order to do this. It's worth noting that once you have registered, you must payroll your employees' benefits. Failure to do so could leave you liable to pay the tax that is due on them. So a bit more information now on how it works. So once you've registered to payroll benefits, HMRC will update your employees' tax codes and it will remove the benefits that were previously reported on a P11D. So their tax code would go back to kind of a normal one. Typically it would be 1257L, as the value of the benefit is going to be taxed through the payroll moving forward. You would then need to add the taxable amount of the benefit to the employee's pay and deduct the tax that is due. And you would report that as part of your full payment submission, your FPS, through payroll. As mentioned, you still need to report your Class 1A national insurance on applicable benefits at the end of the tax year. And if you're not sure whether the benefit you're providing is subject to Class 1A national insurance, as not all benefit types are, you can find more information on the gov.uk guidance. They've got an A to Z of different benefit types, and that should provide some clarity. Now, under the current scheme, it is possible to payroll all benefit types with the exception of employer-provided accommodation and beneficial loans. So both of these benefit types will need to be put through a P11D at the end of the tax year currently, but that is something that will change in the future, and there'll be an option to start payrolling those benefit types in 2026 onwards. So I've already mentioned that you do need to register to payroll your benefits, and that must be done before the start of the tax year. So if, like some of you here, you are planning to payroll benefits for 2025 to 26, you must have registered to do so by the 5th of April of this year. Part of the registration process, you will confirm what benefit types you will be payrolling. So you don't have to benefit all benefit types. You can choose which ones. And following that registration, you will need to write to your employees, explaining to them that you are payrolling and what that means for them. Now, we have got some guidance on what sort of information you need to provide in our knowledge base articles, and there's also similar guidance available on gov.uk. So do check out the links on the handout here if you need more information on that. Also worth mentioning that if you have registered payroll benefits and you wish to cancel that registration, you can still do so up to the 5th of April. So if you decided that you're going to sort of hang on for another year, you want to go back to P11D, you can cancel your registration on the online service. So before we go into the demos, I want to give some examples of how you would calculate the taxable amount for the benefits that you're providing, because these are the amounts that you will need to put through your payroll. Now, first thing to say is that the cash equivalent of a benefit is calculated in exactly the same way as it is when you report it on a P11D. And typically on a P11D, that would be an annual value of the benefit. And when you payroll, what you'll need to do is you'll need to split that into the appropriate amount for each payday. So once you have the cash equivalent, you would divide that by the number of paydays in the year, and that will then give you the taxable amount that you need to process through your payroll. So I'm going to give you some fairly simple examples here, starting with a medical insurance benefit. So in this example, the annual cash equivalent of the medical insurance policy is £300. So that's what it costs us per year. It's provided to employees paid monthly, so they have 12 paydays in the year. So £300 divided by 12 is £25 per month. So that is how you would work out the taxable amount for a benefit with a cash equivalent of £300 per year. Of course, if you pay weekly, you divide by 52 or 53. If you happen to have a week 53 in the tax year, fortnightly divide by 26, 4 weekly divide by 13. Another example would be for a company car. Now, getting the annual cash equivalent of a company car does involve some calculations. There is an online calculator on the HMRC website, or there's also company car records in Sage Payroll that will do this calculation for you, which we're going to see later. But again, once you've worked out the annual cash equivalent, you then need to convert that to the pay period for your employee. So let's say we have a weekly employee this time. So annual cash equivalent, 9,360. We've got 52 paydays in the year. So we divide 9,360 by 52, and that gives us a taxable amount of £180 per week. Now, this is all well and good if it's just one annual amount that you're dividing by the number of paydays. I guess the complication comes in when you're dealing with changes to benefits mid-tax year, particularly when you're reporting them in real time. So it will be down to you to sort of keep track of the calculations, any sort of effective from dates, or where it's a part year, or when employees leave, for example, and you would need to make the appropriate adjustment to the taxable amount in your payroll in those circumstances. And there are some examples on the gov.uk guidance of calculating when there have been changes to benefit values. So we've talked a little bit about the theory of payrolling benefits and calculating taxable amounts. But what I want to go into for the rest of the webinar is how you can put this to practical use in your Sage 50 payroll software. So the payrolling functionality has been available for some years when you've been able to register to payroll benefits and submit the details in your FPS. And in order to process benefit in kind payments, you will need to set up a benefit in kind pay element. So there is a specific setting in the pay element settings that you would select for benefit in kind, and that will disable most of the other settings. So it will always be taxable, but you will then need to indicate whether the benefit is subject to class 1 national insurance contributions. So that's NI contributions by the employee and employer. And it is worth noting that class 1A national insurance contributions are not currently payrolled, with the exception of some termination payments. So those are calculated separately to payroll at the moment and would be reported at the end of the year. So I have linked to the A to Z that I mentioned earlier, which lists all the different benefit types, and that will tell you whether benefits should be subject to Class 1 national insurance or Class 1A, and you'd create the pay element to put through your payroll. So let's just jump into the demo now. I'm going to bring these slides down. And for the purposes of this demo, I've been payrolling some benefits for all of this tax year. So I registered before the 5th of April 2024, and I've started payrolling from the start of the year. First thing I want to show you are my pay elements. So if I go to the company tasks here at the bottom, and then go into the pay elements section, you would set these up in the same place as regular payments. So I do have normal payments for basic, overtime and bonus, but I have also created a couple of other payments that I'm using to payroll some benefits. So if I select number 4 and click onto edit, I just want to show you some settings. So I've entered a description, and I've made it clear in the description that it's a payroll benefit in kind. And on some of the pay slips, there are other indicators as well for this. So that's my description. I haven't entered any default values at company level, but if the benefit is worth the same to all employees, if it's the same cost, you might consider entering maybe a default rate for the taxable amount. But the key setting here is that I've selected benefit in kind, which of course has switched off all of these other settings. It's subject to tax, so it'll work out and deduct the tax on this payment, but it's a notional payment, so it wouldn't increase the gross or net pay. Now I've checked, and this particular benefit type is not subject to Class 1 national insurance, so I have not ticked that box. But at the end of the year, I will need to work out the Class 1A employer's national insurance for my P11DB. So that's the pay element setting, and I've got a similar one set up for a company car benefit. So I've just given it a slightly different description. I've got the exact same settings, and again, I've checked, and this one is not subject to Class 1 national insurance. So if you need to create any more, you can click onto New, and as soon as you tick the benefit in kind box, you can see it applies the relevant settings. You wouldn't necessarily have to create multiple pay elements for different benefit types, but you might find it beneficial to do so, if you pardon the pun, because you'd find it easier to report on the different types of benefit you're providing when you're running reports. So that's why I've got a couple set up, and these would then be assigned to employees in exactly the same way as you would any other payment. So if I just look at my first employee, I go into their pay elements. You can see I've selected the company car, BIK for this one. It's pre-tax, post-NI, and I've entered already the amount of the taxable amount I've entered based on the annual cash equivalent. I've divided that by 12 in this example. And I have another employee in the pay elements where I've assigned the medical insurance benefit in kind. And again, I've entered some default values for this particular employee. Now, if you're setting this up at the start of a year and you have several employees, all with the same benefit kind, you can also assign the pay element globally. So if I needed to do that, I can make a selection of employees, like so. Go to tasks, global changes, and then payments. And then from here, you can add the payment, choose the payment from the list, click OK. So that has now assigned the medical insurance BIK payment to the selected employees. So that's the first bit of functionality in Sage 50 Payroll, creating the pay elements. And as you've seen there, you would assign that in the exact same way as a regular payment. And then you may want to enter the calculated taxable amount or cash equivalent as the default rate in the employee record. Next up, I want to show you company car records. Now, company cars is a bit different to other benefits when it comes to payrolling currently, because it's the only benefit type where you actually need to provide additional details on the benefit that you're providing. So for everything else, it's just the taxable amount that's processed and reported. But for company cars, you also need to include the car details in your FPS submission. Now, this is where the company car record comes into play. This feature has existed in Sage 50 Payroll for years, but it kind of has a new use these days if you're payrolling your company cars. So you would enter the car details as a car record. You can indicate that it's being payrolled by ticking a box. And what that will then do for you is it will calculate the cash equivalent for the current tax year. It will include those car details on your FPS submissions. And when it comes to the end of the tax year, also works out the Class 1A national insurance for the year on that company car. And if you provide fuel for private use, the fuel benefit could also be calculated and recorded in the same way. You'd simply click the fuel provided box. So let's have a look at a company car record. I'm going to create one now. I'll show you one I've already set up. So employee one, if I go to the cars and fuel tab, you can see there's a car record that exists for this employee. So I've recorded the registration number, the list price, the fuel and the CO2 emissions, as well as the dates that they were available to the employee. And as it's being payrolled, I've got this box ticked at the bottom to say the car's being payrolled, and that then shows me some of the relevant information for 24 to 25, the current tax year. So I know the annual cash equivalent of this car, and I'm also going to know the Class 1A when it comes to July, and I need to submit that P11DB. Now, because I've got this annual amount, I've used this and I've divided it by 12, and that's what I've entered as my kind of monthly amount for the company car benefit in kind. So the car record itself won't process the payment. You still need a benefit in kind payment, but it does ensure that the information about the car is included in the FPS. So if you need to create a new one, you go to the cars and fuel tab, you'd click onto new car, you'd complete the new car wizard. So you would enter relevant details there. I'm just going to put some basic details in. Let's put an electric car in. Got the list price. And this is available from the 1st of February, so it's a recent car that we've provided to the employee. I can mark that it's being payrolled, and that's actually worked out the cash equivalent. This is a lot lower because one, it's an electric car, and two, it's only been available since the 1st of February. But I've got £133 cash equivalent, which means I can assign my payment. I know there are 2 months left of the year, February and March, and that would be my taxable amount for that company car. So that's just a run through of the company car record. As I say, it is required if you're payrolling a company car. You must still create the benefit in kind pay element for that, enter the taxable amount, which you can easily calculate based on the cash equivalent on the cars and fuel tab, and it's divided by the number of pay days in the year. So I just want to finish the demo by putting all of this together, and we're going to process a pay run, including some of these benefits. I'm going to point a few things out in the enter payment screen where you can check the benefit amounts. We'll take a look at some reports, and we'll show you how that is submitted to HMRC in your full payment submission. So I'm going to jump straight back to the demo for this one. I've got my process date set to February, and I'll just select the 3 employees that have payroll benefits. So when I go into enter payments, you can see I've got the usual salary entered for this first employee. I've also got the company car benefit and the monthly amount for that. And if you notice at the summary at the bottom, my gross pay is reading the same as the salary. So it hasn't included the £780 in the gross pay because it's not a payment, it's a benefit in kind payment, it's a notional payment. So when I click on the summary tab, that becomes clearer because I can see the taxable gross pay includes the benefit in kind, total gross pay doesn't. And the tax that's deducted, some of this tax will be in relation to the company car taxable amount. Now, you can also see specific information about the benefit in kind on the information tab. So you've got the taxable benefit in kind to date and taxable benefits in kind this period. So that's one way of tracking where you're up to in the year. And as you'll see on the reports, it is just the taxable gross pay that increases, the total gross does not. So a similar situation for this medical insurance benefit, got £25 benefit in kind there. And again, you can see the taxable gross has increased as a result. And then I've got this company car for this third employee, like so. Now, looking at some of the reports for these employees, we'll take a look at the standard pay slips. So these are designed so that you get a little star next to any payroll benefit. And the key for that is that it's a notional payment. And notice as well, similar to before, earnings for NI and total gross pay are the lower, but gross for tax includes this amount. So that's how it's showing separately. I've obviously put PBIC as well in the description, just to make sure that that's clear. And on payment summary reports, the only kind of indication that you've got payroll benefits is again that the taxable gross in this case is higher than the total gross, and that's the reason why. So if I go ahead and update records to complete this pay run, we've now deducted the tax that's due on that benefit from the employee. To report it to HMRC, you would do a full payment submission. So I'm just going to do that right now. So this won't really look any different to a usual FPS, but any liability figures that you're seeing here will include the tax that's been deducted in respect of the benefit. But behind the scenes and the information submitted to HMRC, there's a lot more information. And I just want to show you in our FPS viewer. So this is the latest FPS that I sent. You can actually view everything that was in that FPS if you export the XML file. So there's no need to do this, it's all taken care of for you. But if I just show you what was in the submission for month 11, wherever that was saved. There it goes there. And you can actually see this is the information that was submitted for my first employee. We have got benefits taxed via payroll. And because there's a company car record, it's got the full company car details as well. So that is being sent to HMRC, although you won't necessarily see that unless you look into the XML. But that is how it is sent to HMRC. So just to wrap that up, so taxable amounts are included in your payroll on the payments tab using a benefit in kind pay element. You can see that item appears on the payslip as a separate item, but it's not included in gross pay or net pay, although you will see it reflected in gross for tax, and the tax that was due on that benefit in kind is included in the total tax deducted. Once you've done your pay slips and updated records, we then did our full payment submission. So within that submission, it will contain the benefit details, so the total payroll benefits, and also a year-to-date value for that, and the details of any cars. So that's the only benefit type where there is additional information included. I also wanted to mention a suggested report if you ever need to sort of track back on payroll benefits that you've processed throughout the year. So the payment type history report, one of my personal favorites, is quite versatile. As part of the criteria values, you can be selective as to what payment types you want to include. So if you did need to sort of look back at how much of a particular benefit you have processed in the tax year, payment type history report will do that job for you. So I'll just show you where to find that one. So if you go to the main reports option above the employee list, I've got it added to my favorites, but you do find it in the employee reports. So it's payment type history, detailed. And if I did want to check on the total value of the BIKs, I could run it for the full tax year, like so. But in the payment type filter, if you choose in, you can then specifically choose the payments you're interested in. So number 4 and 5 in my example. And then I can have a check back. This is the total taxable value of the company car I've payrolled so far. Same goes here for the medical benefit, and I can see that, yes, this is going to end up being the correct values for the year. So a bit of a tip there, as we don't currently have specific reports on benefits in kind, but as I say, this is a really useful one for focusing on specific pay elements. So that was a quick look at how it works currently under the voluntary payrolling of benefits. But as you'll be aware, there are changes on the horizon. They're planned from April 2026. So this was confirmed in the autumn budget announcement that the government will be mandating the reporting of income tax and Class 1A national insurance contributions for most benefits in kind via payroll software. We say most benefits because the accommodation and loan benefits can still be reported on a P11D from April 2026, although you will be able to voluntarily payroll those benefit types. They do involve quite complicated calculations, so it'll be interesting to see how that works in practice. But for all other benefit types, it will be mandatory to report them via your payroll software. So one of the key differences between how it currently works and how it will work is that the Class 1A national insurance will need to be reported and paid in real time, whereas right now it's reported at the end of the tax year as part of the P11D employer declaration. They've also said there will be an end of year process that could be used for amendments, although they would prefer employers to make any necessary corrections during the tax year by adjusting taxable amounts as needed. And there is the expected requirement of more data to be provided by the employers, which will provide a more granular breakdown of the benefit in kinds being reported through payroll. So I guess we get a flavour of that with the current requirement for company cars. So you do need to record the car details and include them in the FPS submission. We'd expect similar for other types of benefits. We don't have the exact technical specification at this stage. Government have said that they will be publishing that this year. And of course, we will be developing our software to help support our Sage users with these changes and ultimately to make your life as easy as possible. So you can read more about those changes that are planned. I've linked to the gov.uk page on that. But just a few things to be aware of there. And that actually brings us towards the end of our webinar. So we are going to stay online because I'm sure there's been a few questions come through in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as possible. I have put together some useful links which are available on the handouts if you would like to download them. So links to our knowledge base articles on how to payroll benefits and also the gov.uk guidance. Further help can also be found via our help centre, sage.co.uk/help, and also at Sage University at sage.com. While we have so many of you here as well, I would like to give you, or we would like to give the opportunity to be involved in some user research into potential improvements to the payrolling process in Sage 50 Payroll, with a view to when that becomes mandatory in April 2026. So if that is something that you'd like to get involved with, if you don't mind being contacted by our product team, you can provide your insights, any suggestions and feedback on how you would like such features to work. I'm just going to put a poll up on screen and we'll leave it up for a few minutes, giving you the opportunity to sort of express an interest. So that's going up on screen now. So if you are interested in taking part in that user research, we do have exciting plans for how we're going to improve this for when it does become mandatory, and we would love for you to be involved. With that said though, I'm going to go on to mute for a few minutes just to check on how those questions are going. We're going to try and stick around a few more minutes to get some more answers out to you, and I will come back to say goodbye when we are ready to wrap things up. So I'll speak to you soon. Hi everyone, and thank you so much for sending your questions through. As you can imagine, we have had a very large volume of questions, so we've put out as many answers really as we have the time for now. Don't forget that we do have the links to the further resources that I've shared within the slides, and no doubt we'll be running similar sessions on this in the future, particularly as it becomes mandatory in 2026. We are going to be shutting down this session shortly. Apologies if we haven't got round to answering your questions. You won't be able to download the Q&A. I've seen a few questions about that. You can copy and paste answers that you've seen in that chat if you get a chance to. And don't forget, if you'd like a copy of the handouts, they are still available to download. So I just want to wrap things up at this end by saying thank you so much to everyone that's joined us at the webinar today. I hope you found the information useful and it's given you some insight into how this might work for you, if not from next April, certainly from April 2026. And just wish you the best for the rest of the week, and we look forward to maybe seeing you on some of our other webinars in the future. But we will be closing the webinar down shortly. It's goodbye for now.